You know, when you watch like a world-class illusionist perform a magic trick on stage, there is this overwhelming sense of effortlessness.
Oh, yeah,
They
completely.
just snap their fingers,
Yeah.
right? And a dove appears out of thin air. And for you, the learner out there, the person who is constantly curious about how things work, you just get to sit back and experience the awe. You get the magic.
Right, because it feels entirely spontaneous. I mean, the mind registers the outcome instantly without having to, process any of the underlying friction or the mechanics of it.
Exactly. But what you don't see are the trap doors. You don't see the spring-loaded mechanisms hidden in the sleeves or the mirrors perfectly angled to deceive the eye.
Or the thousands of hours of grueling practice.
Yes. The repetitive practice required to make that one single motion look like it required literally zero effort. And right now, the digital tools you use every day, the workflows you manage, even the way your teams communicate, they are fundamentally failing.
They really are.
Because they are forcing you to build your own trapdoors. They're forcing you to manage the mechanics instead of just experiencing the magic.
Which is exhausting.
It is. So today, we are doing a deep dive into an incredible blueprint to fix exactly this. It's a curated selection of excerpts from the 2026 book, Habit Machine, AI Product Management, by Dr. Vladimir Diachkov.
And, Dr. Diachkov brings a highly specific and really critical lens to this whole problem.
He really does.
Because he operates right at the intersection of behavioral economics and high-scale product engineering. I mean, he holds a PhD in behavioral economics. He's built AI systems grounded in World Health Organization data, and he's scaled mobile apps to, over 180 million monthly active users.
Which is just a staggering number of people.
Right. And he's delivered payment integrations that generate nine-figure profits. So he understands that building a product isn't just a software challenge. It's a deep architectural exploration into human psychology.
So we are going to explore a core concept from his work titled Simple Products, Engineering the Modern Magic. And the mission of this deep dive is to fundamentally rewire how you think about design, efficiency, and habit.
It's a big shift in perspective.
It's massive. We're going to unpack why adding more features often destroys a product's value, how the human brain actually processes digital interaction on a neurological level, and we're going to break down his exact four-step formula for creating experiences that feel completely effortless.
I love that framework.
Okay, let's unpack this because Diachkov makes a really bold claim right out of the gate in the text. He states that product magic isn't sorcery. It is, and I quote, ruthless subtraction masked as intuition.
Yeah, that phrase, ruthless subtraction, it really serves as the anchor for his entire philosophy because there's this pervasive myth in technology that simple products are simple to build.
Right, like it's just easy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the reality is the exact opposite. When a product feels magical, it's because a product team they've absorbed an immense amount of complexity on the back end.
They took the hit for you.
They completely did. They've taken on the burden of ruthless subtraction so completely that the end user never has to see the complexity. They don't have to manage the database routing or even think about the logic sequence. The team hides the mirrors.
We have to look at this through the lens of our biological limits, I think. Because the brain is fundamentally a prediction engine optimized for one primary goal, conserving energy.
Yes, caloric energy, literally.
Right. So every time a user encounters complexity, like a chaotic dashboard, an ambiguous button, or some horrible multi-step form, the brain experiences a cognitive tax. It has to burn caloric energy just to process the chaos.
And what's great is Dr. Diachkov quantifies this biological limit using two foundational psychological laws. First, he points to Hicks' law.
Okay, break that down for us.
So this principle dictates that decision time increases logarithmically with the number of choices you present to someone. If you give a user two clear options, the brain processes the differential rapidly and makes a choice.
Easy. Left or right.
Exactly. But if you give them 20 options, the brain has to run a comparative analysis on every single permutation, and the user just freezes.
It's analysis paralysis.
Exactly. And second, he brings in working memory constraints, specifically Miller's law.
This is where we get into the actual hardware of the human brain, right?
Yeah.
Because working memory is essentially the brain's temporary scratch pad. It's where we hold information just long enough to actually use it.
And Miller's law shows that the scratch pad is incredibly small, What's fascinating here is just how strict that biological cap is.
Like, how small are we talking?
The human working memory maxes out at roughly 4 concurrent elements.
Wait, really? Just 4?
Just 4. So when a digital interface exceeds that limit, like when you have 5, 6, or 10 distinct elements competing for a user's attention, error rates spike aggressively.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, and the time it takes to complete a basic task literally doubles because the user has to constantly context switch. They are literally dumping information out of their working memory to load new information in.
You know, this sounds exactly like the difference between a diner with a 20-page menu and a Michelin star restaurant.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Like at the diner, you sit down, open this massive laminated book, and you just stare blankly at 300 items. You are completely paralyzed by all the options.
Because you have to evaluate the chicken parmesan against the Greek salad against the breakfast burrito.
Exactly. The diner is shifting the entire cognitive burden of curating a cohesive meal onto you, the customer. But at a Michelin star restaurant, you sit down, and they just bring you a perfectly curated tasting menu.
Right. The chef has absorbed the cognitive burden of deciding flavor profiles, portion sizes, and sequencing.
You don't make decisions, you
Right.
just get the incredible outcome.
Because the Michelin star chef operates on ruthless subtraction, they have eliminated every variable except the optimal sequence of dishes.
But wait, let me push back on this a little bit.
Oh.
Because if we look at the real world, especially the enterprise software world, this theory seems to clash with what users actually do. Don't we inherently want choices? Like, look at what Deichkoff calls SaaS sprawl. We have massive software platforms that are practically drowning in toggles, custom dashboards, permission matrices, and endless drop-down menus.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
And those features exist because users, particularly enterprise buyers, explicitly demand them during the sales process. They constantly demand customization.
What's fascinating here is that if we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a massive fallacy that product teams fall into. They confuse user control with user empowerment.
Oh, interesting distinction.
Yeah, it's absolutely true that users will frequently ask for more features in focus groups or on sales calls. They will request 50 different ways to format a document or 20 different ways to filter a data table.
Because they think they need it.
Right. But giving them those 50 ways isn't empowering them, it's exhausting them. The cognitive load itself literally becomes the product.
The user essentially has to become a system administrator just to get their actual job done. They aren't doing marketing or engineering anymore. They're just managing the software configuration.
Exactly. You end up with these labyrinthine interfaces where simply generating a weekly report requires a 5-step mental checklist. And we see this accelerating right now with AI tools, actually.
Wow. Absolutely. The prompt engineering fatigue.
Yes. Teams are releasing AI assistants that require the user to be an expert in prompt engineering. They ask the user to specify the persona, the tone, the output format, and the negative constraints just to get a basic summary.
Which defeats the purpose of an assistant.
Totally. Humans inherently want to escape that cognitive tax. They ask for features because they falsely believe a new toggle will solve their underlying problem, but the resulting complexity actually creates a new, much heavier burden.
I look at this cognitive tax and I realize it's a massive habit killer. Because if I'm spending 10 minutes configuring a dashboard every single time I log in, I am not forming a seamless routine. I am performing a chore.
Exactly.
That has to destroy the habit loop on a neurological level, doesn't it?
It actively starves habit formation. And this is vital because modern products do not win on feature checklists. They win on behavioral integration.
Okay, define behavioral integration for us.
It means they win by replacing a user's legacy routine with a new, more efficient routine. The habit loop, cue, routine, reward, it requires a frictionless pathway to function.
Right.
If a workflow requires active troubleshooting, like if you have to hunt through a Reddit thread or a community forum to figure out a setting.
We've all been there.
Right, or if you have to manage a dozen preferences before the tool even starts working, the brain registers that entire interaction as work.
And since the brain is an energy conservation machine, it avoids work at all costs. It actively resists returning to environments that drain its caloric resources.
Precisely. The interaction registers as a high-friction chore, not an automatic routine. And when an interaction feels like work, the habit loop cannot close, which triggers a catastrophic chain reaction of bloat across the entire product lifecycle.
What does that chain reaction look like in practice?
Well, first, motivation decays almost immediately. The primary metric Dyachtov highlights here is day 7 retention.
Ah, the classic drop-off.
Yeah, for complex products, day 7 retention drops off a cliff. Users might try it on day 1 out of curiosity, but by day 7, the cumulative cognitive tax outweighs their initial motivation.
And the ripple effects hit the entire business. It isn't just the user who suffers. The product team gets buried alive. Support tickets begin to multiply exponentially because users are perpetually confused by the sprawling interface.
It's a nightmare for support.
And then the engineering team slows down. Instead of shipping new, innovative value, they are trapped doing maintenance. They are forced to maintain all these legacy pathways, undocumented edge cases, and custom configurations that they built just to give the user those illusory choices.
Which is why Dyachkov argues that simplicity is not an aesthetic preference. It is an economic weapon.
An economic weapon. I love that.
He issues a stark warning in the text. He says, when users spend more time managing your product than actually extracting value from it, you have crossed a fatal threshold.
That is a phenomenal way to frame it. The product ceases to be a tool and it becomes a tax.
And the behavioral economics perspective on this threshold is fascinating because you can build a technology that is objectively mathematically superior in terms of its raw capabilities.
Like it does more things faster.
Right. But humans will absolutely abandon a superior technology if the cognitive cost of operating it outweighs the immediate relief it provides.
That's a huge blind spot for engineering.
It really is. The market will relentlessly signal that a leaner competitor is about to steal your entire user base simply by solving the exact same core problem with fewer steps.
We saw this historically with the transition to early MP3 players, didn't we?
Perfect example, yeah.
Because there were devices before the iPod that had more features, more granular equalizer settings, and arguably even better audio formats. But the cognitive tax of managing the files and navigating those clunky interfaces was just way too high.
The friction was terrible.
Apple won by reducing the cognitive tax to a single scroll wheel.
Because users don't pay for your complex backend architecture or your sprawling feature lists. They pay for the outcome. They pay for the feeling of magic.
So if complexity starves habits and creates this massive economic vulnerability, how do we engineer the opposite? How do we build systems that actually nurture habit formation?
This leads us directly into the core framework of the book, Dr. Dyachkov's 4 principles of frictionless design.
Let's get into it. What's principle 1?
The first principle establishes the absolute baseline for any user interaction. Principle 1, be obvious without instructions.
Okay, obvious without instructions.
This demands that the legibility of a product must be immediate. If a user requires a tutorial, if they have to read a documentation wiki, or if they are forced to watch a 2-minute onboarding video just to complete the core action of your product, your interface is leaking cognitive load.
Dyachkov has this brutal, unforgiving rule in the book, actually. He says, if you have to explain it, it's not ready.
It's harsh, but it's true.
For you listening, think about the last time you downloaded a highly recommended app, opened it up, and immediately had to swipe through 5 screens of a forced tutorial pointing out where all the hidden menus are. How did that feel?
I always skip them.
Right.
Yeah.
Did it feel like you were being handed a magic wand, or did it feel like you were being handed a syllabus for a homework assignment?
It inevitably feels like a homework assignment because of how it forces the brain to process information. To understand why tutorials are a crutch for bad design, we have to look at Daniel Kahneman's dual system theory of the brain.
Oh, system 1 and system 2.
Exactly. Teaching a user, forcing them to read instructions, memorize button locations, and consciously evaluate options forces them into system 2 thinking. And system 2 is our slow, deliberate, highly analytical, and deeply exhausting mental state.
You are literally burning mental fuel just trying to navigate the screen.
Yes. Revealing value, on the other hand, taps into System 1 thinking. System 1 is fast, automatic, intuitive, and associative. It operates without conscious effort. You want your product to live entirely within System 1.
Dyachkov gives some incredible examples of products that successfully bypass System 2 and speak directly to System 1 intuition. Take Linear, the project management tool for engineering teams.
That's a great case study.
Because Jira and other legacy tools require heavy System 2 processing. You have to click through multiple hierarchical menus, configure dropdowns, and manually assign sprints. Linear stripped all of that away by mapping their interface to natural developer workflows.
Right, they leaned into what developers already knew.
Exactly. They relied heavily on command line style keyboard shortcuts. Developers didn't have to learn a new clunky visual paradigm. They just started typing the way they already type in their code editors.
And Perplexity, the AI search engine, is another perfect manifestation of this obviousness. I mean, for 2 decades, we were trained to accept the cognitive load of traditional search engines.
The 10 blue links.
Right. You type a query and you receive a grid of 10 blue links. You then have to engage System 2 thinking to open multiple tabs, skim the articles, evaluate the credibility of each source, and synthesize the answer yourself.
Which is a ton of work for the user.
It's exhausting. Perplexity bypassed that entirely. They replaced the 10 blue links with a single direct-cited answer. The cognitive load of synthesis is completely absorbed by the AI backend.
And Raycast does the exact same thing for the Mac operating system. It takes the fragmented, highly visual process of clicking around to find files, switching between apps, and managing system settings, and it collapses it into a single searchable command layer.
It's brilliant.
You hit a keyboard shortcut, you type what you want in plain English, and it happens. You don't have to remember where a file is saved. You just command it to appear. It reveals the value instantly.
But here is the thing. Once an interface achieves that level of immediate legibility, where the user intuitively understands what to do, the challenge shifts. Because understanding an interface visually is entirely different from executing an action efficiently.
Right. Knowing what the button does doesn't matter at all if you have to click 12 different buttons in sequence to get the result. Which brings us to principle 2. One action, one outcome.
The core concept here is compressing a user's intent into a single, unified gesture.
It is the ultimate compression of the distance between human desire and digital fulfillment. But here's where it gets really interesting, because I read that one action, one outcome rule, and my immediate reaction was, isn't this just a recipe for dumbing a product down?
A lot of people think that, yeah.
Like, how do you possibly build complex enterprise-grade tools or sophisticated financial software if everything is reduced to one giant button? It sounds like you're stripping away all the power just to make it look simple.
It is a very common and very dangerous misconception in product development. But Dr. Dajkov is explicitly clear in the text. This is absolutely not about dumbing down functionality. It is entirely about sequencing it.
Okay, elaborate on that. Sequencing.
It goes back to our opening metaphor of the magic trick. It's about absorbing the raw complexity on the back end so the user only has to perform one action on the front end. The power and the complexity are still fully intact. They are just orchestrated differently.
Oh, so the trapdoors are still there, doing all the heavy lifting, completely out of sight.
Let's examine his example of Stripe. I mean, before Stripe revolutionized digital payments, integrating a checkout system onto a website required navigating a bureaucratic and technical labyrinth.
He was in a nightmare.
A developer had to secure a merchant account, configure a third-party payment gateway, manually ensure PCI compliance regulations were met to handle credit card data legally, and build custom fraud detection algorithms.
Just to accept a single dollar.
Exactly. It was an incredibly complex, multi-step, high-friction process. Stripe did not remove those necessities. PCI compliance is still legally required. Fraud detection is still critical. Stripe simply abstracted them.
They hid the plumbing.
They absorbed all of that massive back-end complexity and packaged it behind just 3 lines of code. For the developer, integrating payments became one action, one outcome.
And Apple Pay is another perfect example he outlines. Think about the sheer volume of technical and financial operations occurring when you tap your phone at a grocery store register.
It's mind-boggling when you actually map it out.
You have biometric authentication, verifying your identity, localized encryption, securing your card data, near-field communication protocols talking to the physical terminal, and real-time banking verification querying a server halfway across the country.
All in milliseconds.
Apple collapsed all of those disparate, highly complex systems into a single, effortless tap.
And this principle of compression is so critical to habit formation that Dajkov actually ties it to a golden metric: time to first value.
Time to first value.
He argues that if a user cannot experience the core value of your product within 3 minutes of their very first interaction, you are hemorrhaging momentum.
3 minutes.
If the setup process, the configuration, or the required data entry takes longer than 3 minutes, the cognitive friction becomes too high. The user will likely abandon the process before any behavioral foundation can be laid.
3 minutes. That is a brutally tight window to prove to a stranger that you can solve their problem. But here is the catch. A single tap and a 3-minute time to first value are phenomenal engineering feats. But engineering alone doesn't guarantee human adoption.
No, it doesn't.
You still have to convince a human being to physically integrate that tap into their messy, chaotic Tuesday morning routine. How do we cross that behavioral bridge? This brings us to principle 3, fits existing habits.
The behavioral reality that many engineers ignore is that humans are deeply, stubbornly path-dependent.
We like our routine.
We really do. We strongly prefer extensions of our current behavior over wholesale replacements of our behavior. Products that demand a total lifestyle reorganization or a complete overhaul of a team's established workflow face an almost insurmountable barrier to entry, regardless of how superior their technology is.
It's the difference between asking someone to learn a complex new ballroom dance versus just falling into step and walking next to them.
That's exactly it. Take the launch of AirPods. Apple didn't try to invent a completely new paradigm for how humans listen to audio. They leveraged the existing, well-established expectations around Bluetooth headphones.
People were already in the habit of putting devices in their ears.
Right. But what Apple did was surgically remove the specific friction point that made the existing habit annoying. They eliminated the manual pairing handshake entirely.
Oh, the pairing process used to be awful.
It was. Before AirPods, you had to navigate into your phone's settings, hold down a tiny button on the headphones, wait for a blinking light, and hope the devices found each other. Apple removed the handshake, you just open the case. It fit exactly into the existing physical habit of putting on headphones, but it removed the cognitive tax of connecting them.
He highlights Notion as a prime software example here, too. When Notion launched, they didn't march into enterprise offices and force teams to completely abandon the fundamental concept of digital documents.
Because people know how to write in documents.
Right. Instead, Notion took that existing mental model and expanded it. They merged standard text notes, relational databases, and project timelines into a single fluid canvas that mirrored how collaborative work already flows in a modern office. It felt deeply familiar to anyone who had ever used a word processor, yet it was infinitely more connected.
This raises an important question, and Dyatlov addresses it head-on in a critique of Silicon Valley culture. Why do founders and product managers constantly talk about wanting to disrupt behaviors?
It's like the ultimate buzzword. Everything has to be disruptive.
Exactly. But behavioral economics tells us you should almost never try to disrupt user behavior. You should aim to migrate user behavior.
Migration over disruption.
Disruption implies a high behavioral tax. It forces the user to discard their established routines, unlearn their muscle memory, and burn immense cognitive energy learning a new paradigm. It's expensive for the user mentally.
And as we know, the brain hates spending energy.
Right. Migration, conversely, implies a low behavioral tax. You take their existing momentum and gently redirect it onto a smoother track. The lower the behavioral tax, the faster the habit loop locks in. You have to design for migration, not conversion.
Because if you try to force a hard conversion, you're asking them to do work. And as we established, the brain hates work. It will reject the disruption. But when you successfully migrate a habit, when the transition is so seamless that the user barely realizes they've changed tools, you reach the absolute holy grail of product design.
Which brings us to the final principle.
Principle 4 becomes the default status.
The end game for a product isn't just to be the preferred option on the market. Preference still implies that a conscious choice is being made by the user.
Like, they're still weighing you against competitors.
Exactly. If they prefer you, they're still evaluating you against alternatives. The true end game is to become the automatic choice. It is when a product becomes so incredibly reliable, so deeply embedded in your daily routine, and so devoid of cognitive tax that the mere thought of switching back to the old way of doing things doesn't just feel different, it feels like a massive, painful regression.
The example of Spotify illustrates this perfectly. Spotify didn't just build a better MP3 player or a faster streaming architecture. It literally replaced the entire mental model that humanity had around music consumption.
There's a total paradigm shift.
For decades, we operated on a model of ownership. You had to buy physical CDs, rip them to a hard drive, manually curate playlists, and sync files to a device via a cable. Spotify shifted the global baseline to a model of access.
And in doing so, they made algorithmic discovery the new default state.
Now, the idea of having to manually search for, purchase, download, and organize an MP3 file feels absolutely archaic. It feels like churning your own butter.
We see the exact same paradigm shift happening right now in software development with AI-native tools like Cursor.
Oh, Cursor is fascinating.
Cursor didn't just add a slightly better autocomplete function to a traditional code editor. They fundamentally rewired how developer workflows operate by building around conversational, RA-grounded iteration.
Let's actually look under the hood of what Cursor's doing there. Because understanding GRAG retrieval augmented generation is crucial to seeing why it changes the default behavior. It isn't just a chatbot sitting next to your code.
Not at all. RG is the mechanism that allows the AI to contextualize its answers based on your specific proprietary data. In Cursor's case, the AI reads and vectorizes your entire code base.
It knows everything you've written.
Yes. It understands how your specific files interact, what your naming conventions are, and how your architecture is structured. So when a developer asks the AI to build a new feature, they aren't just getting generic code snippets scraped from the internet. They're getting highly specific, context-aware code integrated directly into their existing files.
So the developer is no longer just manually writing syntax line by line. They are orchestrating architecture in conversation with an AI that possesses perfect recall of their entire project.
It completely elevates the developer from a bricklayer to an architect. And once that level of conversational context-aware coding becomes your routine, going back to a traditional static text editor where you have to type every single character manually feels incredibly slow.
You've established a new default.
You have.
I love this phrase Dishkov uses in the book when he talks about this level of deep adoption. He calls it organizational trauma.
It is a powerful and really evocative concept. When a behavior becomes true infrastructure, like when a finance team's entire month-end close relies on an automated tool like RAMP, or when a massive engineering team's entire design system lives in Figma, displacing that tool requires organizational trauma.
It's not just a software update at that point.
Exactly. To rip out that default tool requires retraining hundreds of employees, risking massive data migration failures, and breaking years of established communication flows. That organizational trauma is the ultimate competitive moat.
At that point, you aren't even competing on feature sets or pricing anymore, are you? A competitor could offer a tool with 20 more features for half the price, and the enterprise still wouldn't switch because the trauma of migrating away from the default is just too high.
You are competing entirely on behavioral gravity. You have successfully engineered the default status, and the gravitational pull of that habit keeps your users locked in.
So understanding these 4 principles, making the product obvious without instructions, compressing actions to a single outcome, migrating existing habits rather than disrupting them, and engineering that default status, that is all incredible theory.
It is.
But if you are a builder, a manager, or a leader, how do you actually measure if you are achieving this in reality? Because before your product roadmap devolves into a bloated, feature-heavy maintenance trap, you need a highly tactical way to audit your cognitive load.
And that's where Dr. Daichkov provides a highly actionable framework. He calls it the Simplicity Dividend diagnostic.
The Simplicity Dividend.
It is a 6-question checklist designed for product teams to rapidly identify exactly where friction is hiding and where the habit formation loop is breaking down.
Let's run through these 6 questions and we'll debate them a bit. I want to apply this dynamically. Let's use a massive, ubiquitous enterprise tool as our punching bag here. Let's use Salesforce.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that most companies use it.
Sounds good.
So, question 1. Can my first-time user complete the core action without reading documentation or watching a tutorial?
If the answer is no, you have fundamentally failed the legibility test. You are forcing that exhausting system to thinking we discussed earlier, and if we apply this to Salesforce, the answer is almost universally no.
Oh, absolutely not.
A new sales rep cannot simply log in and intuitively understand how to properly log a complex opportunity without undergoing hours of corporate training and reading internal wiki pages.
They need a Sherpa just to find the right dashboard.
Exactly.
Okay, question 2. Is the primary workflow achievable in 3 taps or keystrokes or fewer? We are looking at that one outcome compression here in Salesforce. Changing the stage of a deal might take 3 clicks, but updating all the required custom fields tied to that stage might take 15 clicks and a lot of scrolling.
Right, the friction just stacks up. Question 3 is really interesting. Do your support tickets cluster around navigation confusion rather than actual feature gaps?
That's a huge tell.
It's a highly critical signal. If your users are constantly submitting tickets asking, how do I find this report? Or where did the export button go? Instead of asking, can the product perform this advanced calculation? Your interface is actively generating cognitive tax. Your UI is the problem, not your capability.
Moving to question 4. What is the feature adoption distribution? Are most of your users only engaging with 20% of your product's total surface area?
Which is so common in legacy software.
It really is.
Yeah.
If 80% of your product is ignored by the vast majority of your user base, it isn't providing value. It is just dead weight, causing decision fatigue and cluttering the visual hierarchy.
And question 5 requires brutal honesty from the product team. Does adding a new feature actually reduce steps for existing workflows, or does it just create new configuration overhead?
Often, teams add a feature to supposedly solve a problem, but to use the new feature, the user has to manage 3 new settings toggles.
Right, so the net cognitive load has actually increased. You haven't simplified anything.
And finally, question 6. Can you remove a legacy pathway in your product without breaking the core value delivery? This tests whether you are actually sunsetting old code or just piling new features on top of a crumbling foundation.
It's the ultimate test of ruthless subtraction.
So if a team runs this diagnostic, how do they score it? What is the verdict?
Dr. Diachkov provides a rigid scoring rubric. If you can confidently, objectively say yes to 5 or more of these questions, you are successfully compounding simplicity. You are on the path to creating that sense of modern magic.
And if not?
If your score is below 3, which, by the way, many legacy enterprise tools would likely score, you must immediately pause what he calls the feature factory.
Stop shipping new stuff.
You have to mandate a freeze on shipping new capabilities. You must audit your cognitive load, systematically prune the dead weight, and completely rebuild your interface around that single magic button.
Because users do not pay for your complex architecture. They pay for the outcomes. And if you look at your own daily workflows, even if you aren't writing code or managing software products, this behavioral framework applies directly to your life.
Oh, 100%.
Look at the way you organize your digital files, the way you structure your weekly team meetings, or the templates you use for internal reporting. Are you constantly adding configuration overhead? Are you adding more trackers, more required forms, more check-in steps?
Or are you ruthlessly subtracting the bloat and reducing steps to get straight to the desired outcome?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the behavioral approach is entirely universal. The brain processes a bloated meeting agenda with the exact same cognitive resistance that processes a bloated software dashboard. Friction is friction.
It's all just caloric burn to the brain.
So let's bring this all together. True magic. Whether you are building a consumer app that reaches millions, an internal tool for your finance team, or just optimizing your own daily routine, is never about conjuring something out of nothing.
It's engineered.
It is engineered through rigorous, ruthless subtraction. It is about actively absorbing the complexity so the end user doesn't have to. It's about minimizing the biological cognitive tax on the brain, adhering strictly to those 4 principles of frictionless design, and ultimately pushing your solution so deeply into a user's workflow that it becomes their unquestioned default status.
It requires a constant, vigilant recognition that every single extra choice, every extra click, and every extra toggle is a tax. And the human brain, optimized for energy conservation, will naturally, inevitably seek to avoid paying it.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over. It builds on what we've discussed today, and it is something we might call the invisible cost of good intentions.
I love this concept.
Think about it. Every single complex, bloated, deeply frustrating product or bureaucratic process that exists today almost certainly started out as a simple, elegant idea. It wasn't ruined maliciously.
No, nobody sets out to build a terrible product.
It was ruined slowly, incrementally, over years, by 1,000 completely reasonable additions. It was ruined by the sincere desire to please every single user request, the mandate to match every single competitor's feature list, and the good intention of giving people more control.
It is the ultimate tragedy of additive design. The road to cognitive overload is almost always paved with good intentions.
So look at your own life, your own projects, the teams you manage, or the tools you use every single day. What is one good intention, a recurring meeting you set up to stay aligned, or maybe a custom field you added to a form just in case we need the data, that is slowly, silently morphed into a cognitive tax?
And what would happen if you decided today to ruthlessly subtract it?
That is the real, unglamorous work of engineering simplicity. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We've loved unpacking the mechanics of modern magic with you.
It's been great.
Next time you see a product work perfectly, and it feels completely effortless, just remember, there is no such thing as magic. There are only trapdoors, mirrors, and the ruthless subtraction of everything that isn't essential. Until next time.